Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive. You know how this worked by now? You send us a bunch of sources, and we get to go through them and pull out all the most fascinating stuff.
I always love seeing what people send in. Every deep dive is so different.
Right. And this time, we're tackling a question that I think a lot of us have wondered about at some point. Can a long-distance relationship really be just as fulfilling as being close to your partner?
It's a really interesting question, and from what I've seen so far, the sources you sent really do explore both sides.
I'm excited to dig in. But first, I think we need to clarify what we even mean by long distance. We're not talking about living a couple towns over, right?
Oh, definitely not. The
Yeah.
sources really focused on those situations where the distance has a major impact on daily life, couples who have to deal with plane tickets, late night calls, and being in totally different time zones.
So not just popping over for a quick visit. And that actually makes me think about another point that came up. There are so many different kinds of long-distance relationships.
Right. There are college sweethearts, people who meet online, and even those where work ends up taking one person far away.
It's like each situation has its own unique set of challenges and rewards.
And it's so interesting that the sources all talk about fulfillment when they're comparing these relationships. It's not just about being happy, it's about feeling deeply connected and satisfied.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Fulfillment has so many different layers to it. It's about emotional connection, intimacy, good communication, all those things that can be hard to maintain even when you are physically together. So how does that all work when you're miles apart?
Well, let's start by taking a look at some of the arguments in favor of long distance. I think you'll be surprised by some of the benefits that came up in the sources.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What kind of benefits are we talking about?
One of the most compelling arguments is that being long distance can actually force couples to become incredible communicators. And I don't just mean texting more often, it's about learning to express your feelings clearly and making sure you're really understood.
So it's like they have to step up their communication game.
Exactly. Think about how much we rely on things like facial expressions and tone of voice in everyday conversation. Well, long distance couples don't really have that luxury.
So they have to be extra intentional about what they say and how they say it.
Right, and the research actually highlighted how couples in long-distance relationships often use specific techniques to make sure they're on the same page. Things like active listening and paraphrasing what the other person said.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like by taking away some of those easy shortcuts, they're actually building a stronger communication foundation.
And the sources suggest that this deeper level of understanding can actually create incredible intimacy, maybe even more so than for couples who are always physically together.
Wow, that's really counterintuitive.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that's not the only surprising benefit that they found.
Oh, not even close. Another really interesting point was how long distance relationships tend to prioritize quality time over quantity. Every visit feels like a special occasion, so they're less likely to just fall into a routine.
So instead of just hanging out after work, they're probably planning romantic getaways and really making the most of that time together.
You got it. And that can make those moments feel even more special, and they tend to create memories that really strengthen their bond.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm starting to see the appeal.
Hmm.
What else did the sources highlight?
Well, this one really surprised me. They argued that distance can actually be a catalyst for personal growth.
Really? How so?
Because you're not constantly together, you have more space to focus on your own interests and goals, work on yourself as an individual. And the sources pointed out that this can lead to a lot of self-discovery and ultimately make you a more well-rounded person.
So you're both growing as individuals, but still choosing to come back together and share those experiences with each other.
Exactly. It's not just about surviving the distance, it's about thriving because of it. And finally, the sources also talked about the incredible level of commitment you often find in long-distance relationships.
Makes sense. Choosing to stay connected despite all the challenges shows you're really in it for the long haul.
Absolutely. But of course, it's not all sunshine and roses. There are some very real challenges that come with distance, and the sources definitely don't shy away from those either.
Right, because even with all these benefits, it can't be easy to miss someone you care about. So I guess those challenges are what we're going to dig into next.
You got it. While long distance can boost communication in some ways, the sources also reveal how it can create new hurdles, especially when it comes to technology. It's a bit of a paradox, actually.
Okay, now I'm really interested to hear more about that. But before we get to all the thorny details, okay, so we've covered some of the surprising upsides of long distance, but now it's time to address the elephant in the room, the challenges. I mean, missing someone is tough no matter what, but What did the sources say about the specific struggles these couples face?
Well, they don't sugarcoat it. One of the biggest challenges, and they're very upfront about this, is the lack of physical intimacy. For a lot of people, physical touch is such a core need in a relationship.
For sure.
And when you're miles apart, well, you just can't fulfill that in the same way.
You can't exactly send a hug through a text message, right?
Yeah.
Although I have tried to get creative with emoji combinations.
Haha, I can imagine. But all jokes aside, the research really highlighted how this can be a real source of frustration and loneliness for people in long distance relationships.
It makes sense. It's just a fundamental part of many relationships that's a lot harder to navigate from a distance.
Yeah, for sure.
And you mentioned earlier how long distance can actually create new communication problems, even though they often develop really strong communication skills overall.
Yeah.
That seems kind of contradictory, doesn't it?
It does, and the sources actually spent some time unpacking that paradox. Even if these couples are really good at expressing their feelings, the nature of technology itself can introduce a whole new set of problems.
Like what kinds of problems?
Well, just think about how much we rely on tone of voice and body language to understand what someone really means. All of that is completely lost in a text message or an email.
Oh my gosh, yes. That totally reminds me of this one time I sent a text to my friend, and I thought it was hilarious, but she totally took it the wrong way.
Oh, no.
It turned into this whole thing, and I just kept thinking, if I was there with her in person, she would totally know I was kidding.
Exactly. And the research actually talked about how even simple things like emojis can be interpreted so differently depending on someone's mood or their cultural background.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's like you're navigating a minefield sometimes.
Yikes, that sounds stressful. So even with the best intentions, miscommunication is a real risk. And I bet distance doesn't exactly help with feelings of insecurity or jealousy either, does it?
Not really. That's another big challenge that the sources highlighted. When you're not physically present in your partner's life, it's really easy for doubts to creep in. You start wondering what they're doing, who they're with, are they still as invested as I am?
Yeah, it's that classic out of sight, out of mind fear.
Exactly. And the distance can really magnify those insecurities. The sources emphasized how important it is for couples to be open and honest about those feelings and to find ways to reassure each other.
Yeah, communication is key. And then on top of all of that, there's the logistical nightmare of trying to coordinate across different time zones.
Ugh, tell me about it.
I have a friend who's dating someone in Europe, and just finding a time to talk can be a huge challenge.
Oh, for sure. One of the sources even told a story about this couple where one person worked on a ship that was constantly crossing different time zones.
What?
Yeah, they had to get so creative just to find a few minutes each day to connect.
Wow, that sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine trying to build a relationship under those circumstances.
It takes serious dedication and flexibility. So yeah, long distance definitely has its downsides.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got the benefits: amazing communication skills, prioritizing quality time, personal growth, and strong commitment. But then on the flip side, we have the lack of physical intimacy, that potential for miscommunication, the amplified insecurities, and then just the straight-up logistical challenges.
Right.
It seems like a really complex equation to figure out.
It is. It definitely is. And while long-distance relationships have those unique strengths that we talked about, the sources we looked at also make a really compelling case for the benefits of being in a close proximity relationship.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit then. What did the sources have to say about why being physically close to your partner might lead to greater fulfillment?
Okay, so one of the most obvious advantages is just the ease of communication. You can have those spontaneous conversations, you can pick up on each other's body language, and you're just generally more in tune with what's going on in each other's lives.
It's all those little moments that we don't even think about that can really add up, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And those moments can help to build intimacy and create a shared history. Plus, and the sources really emphasize this, physical touch and affection are so important for many people. Being able to hug your partner, hold their hand, even just cuddle up on the couch together.
Right.
Those are powerful ways to express love and feel connected that you just don't get in a long-distance relationship.
Yeah, there's just something about being physically present with someone you care about that can be so comforting, especially when things are tough.
Absolutely. And the sources talked about how being there for your partner during difficult times, offering a shoulder to cry on, just being a comforting presence, that's so much harder to do from a distance.
It's that immediate support system that can make a world of difference. And I'm guessing being in close proximity also makes it easier to build a life together, right?
For sure. The sources highlighted how much easier it is to share experiences and create memories when you're in the same place. You can go to concerts together, try new restaurants, even just do errands side by side. It's all about building that foundation together.
It's those little things that really build a relationship over time.
Exactly. And when you're physically present in your partner's life, you're also more likely to be integrated into their social circle and support system. You get to know their friends and family, become a part of their routines and traditions.
It creates that sense of belonging. Okay, so we've now heard really compelling arguments for both sides. But I have a feeling you're going to tell me there's not an easy answer to this question of which type of relationship is ultimately more fulfilling, right?
You know me too well. The sources are very clear that fulfillment is a very personal thing. What works for one couple might be totally different for another.
So what does that mean for our listener who's trying to figure all of this out? Is there any way to find fulfillment no matter the distance?
Absolutely. And that's actually what we'll explore next. The key takeaway here is that it's all about understanding yourself, understanding your partner, and really figuring out what makes your unique relationship thrive.
That sounds like we have a lot more to unpack. Okay, so we've spent this whole deep dive exploring both sides of the coin, the upsides and the downsides of long-distance relationships and those where you're close by.
Right.
But I think the big question is, where does all of this leave us? Is there like a secret formula for figuring out how to make any relationship work no matter the distance?
Well, the sources we looked at didn't exactly offer a magic formula, but they did emphasize one really important thing.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's not really about the distance itself. It's more about understanding yourself and your partner and really figuring out what makes your specific relationship tick.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
Not at all. Some people are naturally more independent.
Right.
They actually thrive on that, and they might find the challenges of a long-distance relationship more exciting than draining. They love having that space to pursue their own things while still having that deep connection with their partner.
Makes sense. Well, for others, that constant physical presence and emotional closeness is what they really need.
Exactly, and neither of those is wrong. What matters is just being aware of your own needs and your partner's needs and finding a way to make it work.
And I think the sources also really stress the importance of being adaptable no matter what kind of relationship you're in.
Oh, absolutely. Relationships are always evolving, so both people need to be willing to adapt to those changes,
Yeah,
communicate openly, and find creative ways to work through those challenges that come up.
for sure. So for those people who are in long-distance relationships, what kind of advice did the sources have?
One thing they highlighted was the importance of regular visits and having shared goals for the future.
Okay.
Knowing when you'll see each other again and working towards eventually closing that distance can help to keep that momentum going.
It's almost like having those concrete plans to look forward to can actually reinforce your commitment to each other.
Exactly. And then for those couples who are already close by, the sources stress the importance of not taking that closeness for granted.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into routines and forget to make time for each other when you're always around.
It really is. So even if you're living under the same roof, it's still so important to be intentional about making time for those moments of connection,
Hmm.
whether it's having a date night or just putting your phones down and actually having a meaningful conversation.
It all comes back to being intentional, whether you're miles apart or in the same room.
You said it. And that actually makes me think of something that wasn't explicitly stated in the sources, but it really resonated with me.
Oh, what's that?
It's the idea that the most important ingredient in any relationship, no matter the distance, is the intentionality you bring to it.
I love that. Tell me more.
Are you truly present with your partner? Are you communicating openly and honestly?
Mm.
And are you actively making an effort to nurture that connection day in and day out?
Those are such good questions. It's not about how many miles are between you, but about how much effort you're both putting into bridging that gap,
Yeah,
both physically and emotionally.
exactly. And that's something we all have control over no matter what our situation looks like.
I love that. Well, this has been such an interesting conversation. Huge thanks to our listener for sending us these sources. They really sparked some amazing discussions.
I agree. I've really enjoyed diving into this with you.
And to everyone listening, remember, no matter what your relationship looks like, you have the power to create something truly meaningful and fulfilling.
It all starts with you.
It's all about being intentional, adaptable, and most importantly, staying connected to what matters most. So until next time, keep diving deep.